I say natural wine because it prompts people to ask the question, isn't all wine natural? And then you can say, no, it's not. I think that is a good conversation starter. The only other term that I like is living wines, the wine actually being alive, or in French, they would say vivant, which is a lovely word. You can say raw wines, pure, naked. I would not go with clean wines. That is more of a marketing term.
Yes. Natural wines are more about the production, like how the farming is done. Clean wines are about consumption, occasion. I'm doing self-care with my vinyasa, my yoga, and my clean wine.
I'm keeping the toxins out of my body. The irony with alcohol anyway. I don't think we should be making claims that alcohol is healthy. We eat food that is grown with a lot of care, and the wine matches.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 152. What's it like to make wine totally by hand without electricity? What is a field blend and why should you try one? And what's the most difficult part of writing a memoir? You'll get those answers and more wine tips in part 2 of our chat with Rachel Signer, who has just published a gripping, addictive memoir, You Had Me At Pet-Nat. If you missed the first part of our chat last week, no worries, you can still listen to this one now, but go back and take a listen afterwards, as it was lots of fun. In the show notes, you'll find a full transcript of our conversation, links to where you can buy Rachel's book, how you can join me in a free online food and wine pairing class, and where you can find me on Zoom, Insta, Facebook, and YouTube live video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/152. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show, as I mentioned last week, my regular segment on CTV's The Social was about highlighting some of our country's best wines that are owned or produced by Black, Indigenous, or people of color. As I said, we vote with our dollars, and these wineries deserve your support. They're terrific wines. I profiled 2 of these wineries last week on this show, and I'll share another 3 with you now. First, we'll head to Nova Scotia, my stomping ground. After completing a degree in psychology and history at Bombay University, India, Avila Coutinho immigrated to Nova Scotia when she was just 19 years old. After a 25-year career in finance, she and her husband Louis purchased the Avondale Sky Winery and Restaurant in 2018, which they now run as a family business with their 2 sons, Carl and Sean, along with their wives. The Avondale Sky Winery once walked on water. It was formerly a church built in 1837, but when Avila and her family heard that it was slated for destruction, they decided to buy the building and convert it into a winery. Catch was that the church was 42 kilometers away from the land where their vines were planted. So they had the building lifted off its original location, moved by road to the shorefront of the Bay of Fundy, where it was loaded onto a ferry and floated on the world's highest tides to its new location. It is a miracle. Every pane of the stained glass survived intact. Their Tidal Bay wine is a style unique to Nova Scotia. It's a blend of highly aromatic, floral grapes that are low in alcohol, just 11%, with crisp, racy acidity that makes it a beautiful match with Atlantic lobster melting in butter or other seafood dishes. Avondale Sky offers a unique experience of what they call dining on the ocean floor. It's a multi-course seafood feast prepared by a local chef, literally on the ocean floor while the tide is out. I guess guests know when to leave because their feet are getting wet. Just kidding. All right, let's move to Ontario now. Steve Byfield, the son of Jamaican immigrants, is the owner and winemaker for Narai Cellars. The name Narai is derived from the South African Shona dialect meaning humility, and I'd say this also describes Steve Byfield. Born and raised in Kitchener, Ontario, Steve started off pursuing a career as a music educator, studying at York University and playing in a jazz band in Southern Ontario. After his first year in university, he started working part-time in the wine industry, eventually moving to Southbrook Winery, where he worked 5 years. In 2008, he created Narai Cellars. This is a virtual winery in that they don't own their own vineyards or winery building. Instead, they contract with top-notch Niagara grape growers and winemaking facilities to create their wines, which have won numerous awards. His folklore sparkling wine, inspired by the Spumante wines of Italy, is a highly aromatic blend of Riesling, Vidal Blanc, Muscat Onatel, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Gewürztraminer. It's just bursting with aromas of soft orange zest, peach, and floral notes. Steve says this was crafted in gratitude to his ancestors' struggle, sacrifices, and hardships. He invites us to raise a glass of this bubbly with our friends and family to create our own memories and folklore. And finally, I have one more winemaker from Ontario to tell you about. Shiraz Motier was born and raised in Fergus, Ontario. His parents emigrated from South Africa to Canada. He was a member of the first graduating class of Brock University's Honors Enology and Viticulture program degree in 2000. That year, he joined Malivoire as a cellar hand, eventually rising to the position of winemaker. At the end of his day, Shiraz returns home to his own Beamsville Bench vineyard, where he farms 3 acres of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Melon de Bourgogne. In 2017, he was named Winemaker of the Year by the Ontario Wine Awards, a recognition of his consistent excellence and contributions to the province's wine industry. Malivoire produces organic wines in a gravity flow winery, where the wine gently flows with minimal intervention from its highest point rather than being pumped up aggressively into tanks. This produces wines of great subtlety. The cheerful little red beetle crawling across the label of his Ladybug Rosé represents the sustainable farming philosophy of Shiraz and owner Martin Malivoire. To combat destructive insects that have a taste for grape leaves, they release thousands of ladybugs into the vineyards. These ladybugs are selective about what they eat, whereas insecticides destroy every bug in their path and leave a vineyard more vulnerable to pest attacks the next year. This wine offers sun-dappled notes of field strawberries and melon, and it's crisp and refreshing. You could pair it with game birds and roast chicken. I'll include a link in the show notes where you can watch the video and find the wines I recommend at nataliemaclean.com/152. Okay, on with the show. Now, you started this magazine, Pipette, which is just beautiful. What was the inspiration? Was it originally because you went to the Loire and couldn't find outlets, and so you thought, oh, I'll just start my own publication? Or what was the driving motive behind this?
I originally was just going to try to self-publish a book just about that trip to the Loire. And then I thought I could also commission other people to do stories and make it more of a group thing. And then there's more voices involved. So it began with 2 friends as a project called Terre, and it was broader than natural wine at that point. But we did 2 issues of Terre, and then I sort of went off on my own and started Pipette. And there was no publication devoted to natural wine. I think at the time, Punch Drink was doing a little bit on natural wine. They still do. And Alice has her newsletter and her books. And other than that, I just felt like there was this void. And I wanted it to be print because I didn't want something else to look at on a screen. I didn't want to hire someone to do a website. I thought a print magazine sounded much more fun and interesting. And yeah, I wanted it to be beautiful. Often I would pour my heart into an article and then there would be a stock photo put alongside it. And I'm like, there are way too many talented photographers out there that would love to go to these wineries. Like they would absolutely love to hop on a train and go visit someone in the Loire Valley. So over time, I found those people.
Yeah. Well, it is gorgeous. I can understand the motivation behind print because you're not competing with text notifications and social media and everything else. The reading experience is completely different. It's far more immersive, and just the tactile beauty of it and the photos, and it's just gorgeous. So how does that sync up or jibe with your natural wine ethos, the eco-friendly? You have to cut down some trees to make this, right?
Well, it is recycled paper, and the packaging that it arrives in is also recyclable. But yeah, I mean, it is a product. But recycled paper, I sort of insisted on that. I think the publisher offered me that straight away. I think the printing industry is quite conscious of the need to recycle paper. So that was never even a problem in the first place.
And what's been the response to the magazine?
I mean, it's ongoing. You know, I still get messages from people that just discovered the magazine and they're like, how can I get all the issues right now? I just love that. Like, I think when the magazine launched, there was a crest in terms of the growth of natural wine. And I just saw all of these businesses pop up, mostly in North America and Australia as well, devoted to natural wine, shops, restaurants, bars. And they often came to me and they said, we want to have it when we open. We want Pipette on our shelves opening day. So I think there's been a huge embracing of natural wine, fanning out from cities like New York, where it was concentrated and blossoming. So the response has been great. I think a few months into the pandemic, I mentioned that I was going to possibly stop publishing the magazine. And that's not just because demand was going down and shipping prices were doubling. It was partly because I just felt with everything going on, the incredible suffering, and also Black Lives Matter taking center stage, the movement that had obviously been going on for a while, but really taking center stage, I thought maybe it's not the time to talk about natural wine. And people wrote to me and they were like, please keep going. We really enjoy this magazine. And I sort of had to rationalize with myself, like, it's okay to make something that people just enjoy. We need that also.
We do. We do. I've had to rationalize my own career, and maybe you have too, Rachel, but we're not doctors saving people, but there has to be a place for pleasure, or as you say, everyday decadence, to celebrate life. We work so hard. I mean, what you're delivering through your magazine and the wines is just joy, and the reward for being here, for working hard, for surviving another day.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for saying that.
So that's a good thing. Absolutely. So let's segue into your book. Do you have a copy of it or an advanced copy of it there?
I have an advanced copy.
Okay.
So the hardcover versions will be ready soon.
There you go. All right. You had me at Pet-Nat. There you go. That's great. So first of all, tell us what a Pet-Nat is so that we're all on the same page.
It's sparkling wine made without any additives. So typically, the champagne method for making sparkling wine involves a secondary fermentation. So picture a wine ferments and goes dry, and then you add a little bit of sugar and yeast to it and put it in bottle, and then it ferments again. And that's how bubbles happen. So a lot of sparkling wine is made that way. With Pet-Nat, and I've got one that I'll taste later. It's my own. So with Pet-Nat, it's generally bottled with a tiny bit of residual sugar. Then the carbon dioxide is just trapped in the bottle as the wine goes dry in the bottle. So the bubbles are caused by one single fermentation. So it's also not fined and filtered, and it should be organic, and there should be no sulfites added. So it's a natural wine that is made sparkling in a single fermentation. Just as a side note, it can also be disgorged, and I think that's much better. So we disgorge our Pet-Nats. So that just means that we store them upside down, then we pop off the cap and let all the tartrates and lees, which are stored in the neck, come out. It gets topped up with fresh wine and sealed with another crown cap and then stored for a little bit before release. Disgorging really helps avoid that like explosion, which some people have experienced opening a Pet-Nat. So if it's disgorged, it shouldn't happen.
And you have yours there?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see it on the camera. Let's show it.
Okay.
Yeah, may as well dive into it as we talk about it and your memoir.
I made Pet-Nat for 3 years. I didn't make it this year. It's very time consuming. You have to like think about a lot of things during vintage because you have to bottle it during vintage. And then you have to disgorge in winter. And with the book coming out and with having a toddler, I honestly just needed to make things a little easier on myself because we touch every bottle. It's all done by hand. And disgorging is a huge process. So this is the 2020 Pet-Nat. I have to finish my rosé first. It was a blend of Chardonnay with some Semillon that was pressed over Gamay skins.
Okay, cool.
So I have a basket press. So picture a round thing with wooden doors and then wood on top and a lever that pushes the wood down. I think you probably have some photos.
Yeah.
Basically, there were Gamay skins in the press from pressing Gamay. And so I pressed Semillon over that. And that's where the color comes from. So it's like light pink. Hopefully it's cold enough that it won't fizz out.
Let me see if I've got my pictures here with your press. Yes.
There she is.
Okay. That's great. I love it. Wow. This is really artisanal. This is by hand. You're having to do this.
Yeah. So there's no electricity in my winery. When I rack, I use a forklift, but everything's manual. So buckets, that's all. We don't use pumps at all.
Okay. More gentle handling of the juice. That is great. So you age your wine in amphorae, like the clay vessels here?
Yeah, those are a couple amphora that were actually made here in South Australia by a 5th generation potter. And we've also recently started using ceramic eggs. They are literally are shaped like an egg. They're still amphora. They just have a specific shape. And those are made in Spain.
Ah,
we love ceramic.
that's great. Oh, there's your magazine. So show us the bottle then. Have you opened that? There you go.
It's fizzy. It has a bit of a stone fruit character. Like it's very bright. Obviously, it has high acidity. Pick early for Pet-Nat. Generally pick early for sparkling wine.
Okay.
And I can really taste the Semillon. Semillon has this. Is it weird if I describe it as it tastes yellow? It just tastes like yellow.
I like
it tastes like straw, and it tastes like, I don't know, buttered toast, like but sourdough a little bit. It tastes yellow.
Yeah. Tastes yellow. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
I think Pet-Nats are really good with food. Same things that champagne would be nice with. So like fried food, fried chicken, fish and chips, that sort of thing. We eat a lot of fish and chips in Australia. It's kind of a national food.
I can imagine it would cut through the gorgeous
It cuts through the
grease and fat. Yeah. No, that would be great. Wow. I've got another one here that is a field blend from Trail Estate, and it has got so much stuff in it. It's no sulfur added, lots of particulate here. Yeah.
Trail Estate is a Pipette stockist. That's so cool.
Oh, that's great. You can see all this stuff. Yeah, they make some wonderful wines, and definitely it's a natural wine, I would think, from all the definitions you've given us.
I love field blends. Field blends are really special.
Yeah, and that's when they're mixing all the different grapes, again, traditionally, because winemakers didn't know what was out there. They were just throwing everything together, right?
And it's a great way to make wine. It achieves like a very special kind of balance and beautiful color. Exactly.
Yes. Wow, it's delicious. It has a lot of stuffing in it. It's almost savory. I just sometimes find it hard to describe it. Yeah. Do you see any difference between natural wines and raw wines, or are they kind of two names for the same thing?
Yeah. So the name question, that debate occasionally pops up, and it is a good debate. People have problems with the idea of natural wine. People have problems with all of the names. I mean, you sort of pick whichever one works for you. I say natural wine because it prompts people to ask the question, isn't all wine natural? And then you can say, no, it's not. And I think that is a good thing. I think it's a good conversation starter. I've also just never really found, the only other term that I like is living wines. I think living wines is really precise. Like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The wine actually being like alive, or in French, they would say vivant, which is a lovely word. And so you can sort of say whatever you want. You can say raw wines. I know people say pure, naked. I would not go with clean wines. That is more of a marketing term created by, I think, Cameron Diaz and other folks.
Cameron Diaz, yes.
Yeah.
That caused another uproar in the industry, which is that I think you pointed out something very smart, whereas natural wines are more about the production, like how the farming is done. The clean wines are about consumption, occasion. Like I'm doing self-care with my vinyasa, my yoga, and my my clean wine, which
I'm
is
keeping
misleading.
the toxins out of my body. Yeah. And the irony, because I mean, it's alcohol anyway. And look, I don't think we should be making claims that alcohol is healthy or one way or the other. But natural wine is quite light on the palate. And it's generally, unless it's from a very warm region, it's generally lower in alcohol. I think that's nice. Going back to the whole Hemingway thing and having a bit of wine at lunch, there's a quote I share in my book, and he talks about how it would be strange to have a nice meal without some wine or some cider. That's where I'm at, like we eat food that is grown with a lot of care. Some of it's grown on our farm or nearby, and the wine matches that. And it's all considered to us part of a relaxing, healthful lifestyle. There's days when I don't have anything to drink. I also skip coffee on some days. Like I think we all have our own threshold for finding balance, but
Sure. Absolutely. No, that's great. So if you were describing your memoir to someone, how would you describe it in a nutshell?
I think it's a little bit of a coming of age story. It's how I sort of found myself through natural wine. When I discovered natural wine, I was waitressing and working, I think, at least one other job and studying fiction writing. And I was definitely very excited about what I was doing, but I was quite lost personally. And that's definitely described in detail in a few scenes in the book. I think in the romantic relationships that I was choosing to be in. And I think I found something to latch onto that I knew would lead me to a better place. And it was natural wine. And I could have written a book that was a bit more journalistic, and I didn't, because I thought in the end that my personal story would get the points across that I wanted people to understand. It brings people to the Loire Valley, where I work harvest with Domaine Moss, a really, really amazing family. And it brings people to the wine bars of Paris, which is a very central part of natural wine culture, the natural wine bars in Paris. And it brings people to Australia, where I make wine again. And there's a lot in between. There's the Republic of Georgia. There's Sardinia, where we have a really amazing encounter with a winemaker who has lost his entire vintage. But it's all told through my personal experience.
I think that's the power of a memoir. You can still learn a lot, but there's more of a narrative arc. It's almost like reading fiction. Like there are characters. You're a character, Wildman's a character. And I think that really brings the story alive, because we want to read about other people as opposed to just the sort of winemaking and sulfur additions or no sulfur additions. And I think you really did bring it alive through your story, through your own journey in the book.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you find most challenging about writing the book?
It's hard writing about people you love. And there's a lot of people I love in the book. There's my best friend who lives in Paris, who I haven't seen in years because of the pandemic. There's my husband. There's my husband's daughter. And all of that was a bit stressful at times or a bit complicated. And then obviously, I checked in with them before anything kind of went in the direction of publication. So that was hard. And knowing also when to stop was difficult. I wanted to actually keep going and talk about my second vintage. And my editor, editors, you have to love them. They're so great at what they do. She was like, nope, your book stops here. And I'm like, okay.
That's the next book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Who knows what that will be? So I think also just with wine writing that's of a personal nature, there's this balance where you can easily get in the weeds in terms of wine technicalities. It's difficult sometimes to know who you're writing to, because with Pipette, I'm writing often for people who have some awareness of natural wine. With the book, it might not be the case. And so it was just difficult sometimes to know when to explain or when to just kind of roll with it. So hopefully I achieved that balance in some ways.
I think you did. Was there anything that surprised you in writing the book, or did the writing of the book change you in any way?
I think I learned that I can complete a book, which I'm still, I wanted
Yes.
I wanted to write a book for years. There were drafts of this book going back to 2016 when I came back from the Loire Valley. I think ultimately a book comes out when you as an individual are ready. And that's not necessarily where your career is. I think it's where you are as a person. So I worked through a lot to get to the point where I was able to share a book.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you find much crossover between your writing and editing for Pipette and the book? Or was it just a very different experience?
That's a good question. It was almost luxurious to not be the editor for once. I'm always editing other people's work. Yeah, I'm sure I had my editor's cap on in some ways. So my editor, Lauren Marino at Hachette, she works mostly with women's memoirs. And when we first chatted, when she was interested in my proposal, she said, I love working on books about women's lives. Women's lives are so complex and interesting. And I was like, this woman has to be my editor. You're writing a memoir and you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I sharing all my personal information? I'm opening myself up to critique and who's going to read this? And then she said that. And I was like, you. She was great. She actually had a really light touch. It was great working with her.
That's great. And so did you go to, I assume you had an agent and then you approached multiple publishers for this?
Yes. And I am so grateful that I found my agent. I don't think anyone else could be my agent. She is an incredible agent who loves natural wine and was already aware of my magazine. And she was like, I think I've had your wine before. I make 2,300 bottles and she's had one of my wines. That's how into natural wine she is. She's awesome. Laura Nolan just was kismet finding her. And she was my third agent. So it took a while.
Wow, that is fantastic. And so I'm just being curious now, did you go out to a bunch of publishers all at once, or did you sort of target?
She went out to a few, and then Hachette, it was a preempt, which means they just kind of say, we want it.
That is ideal. They take it off the market. No one can even bid on it because they want it so much.
It was so exciting.
That is terrific. That's great. And so what is your publication date?
October 19th.
All right. That's when it'll be on sale.
So people in the United States, I recommend going to bookshop.org and then just type in my name, Rachel Signer, Signer, or type in the title, You Had Me At Pet-Nat, and then you can order there. And that will actually go via independent bookstores near you.
Right, which is important. That's the small independent
I'm not going to
bookstores.
talk about the big guy. The big guy has my book.
Okay, sorry for mentioning it.
Well, the thing is, if you are like in Europe or Asia or South America, probably the big guy is the actual best way to get my book for now, unless your local bookseller has a better way of getting it. In Australia, there's Booktopia and Angus and Robertson. They have it on pre-order. And in Canada, you might walk into your local bookstore and just ask them to order it for you or use the big guy.
Right. Yes. We also have Chapters Indigo in Canada, but we're going to have all the links to where your book is.
Okay. In the UK, there's something called Hive. They have it on pre-order. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it also on audio version, Audible or wherever audiobooks are as well?
Oh, we're working on that. Yeah.
Okay. So that'll come maybe a bit later.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Now, as you said, there's not a lot of travel going on. So how do you intend to promote it? Are you doing a lot of Zoom tastings, podcast interviews, I'm sure?
Yeah, I'll do a couple podcasts. I love podcasts actually, so I'm really excited about that. And there's going to be an excerpt shared. But yeah, I mean, I'll share everything on my personal Instagram and on Twitter. So I'm just at Rachsig, Rachsig. And I have a newsletter as well that perhaps your listeners might enjoy. So once a month, I recommend a couple natural wines that I've enjoyed. And I also recommend a book that I'm reading, which is usually like not at all related to wine. I read a lot of literary fiction and a lot of memoir.
Oh, I need to get your recommendations. I
get on my newsletter. It's free. Yeah,
memoirs.
There's lots of photos. Sometimes I share recipes or I talk about random stories about being a mother in Australia, a million miles from my family and what that's like. So it's just like a monthly-ish thing and I share everything there.
Is there a URL for your newsletter?
It's unfortunately a bit complicated, but I'll definitely send it to you.
We'll put in the show notes the link.
That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So that everybody can find you. I can't believe how fast the time has gone, Rachel. Is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to mention? So we still have some time if you like.
I'm sure there is, but I did open this rosé that I thought might be fun to talk about.
Yes, please, let's do that.
I just love discovering new producers. So I do sort of know these guys. So they're called Canlibero. The cuvée is called Pink Freud.
Okay.
And they're in Campania. And as soon as we can travel, I'm like going to Campania. I actually have quite a while back some heritage from Campania, which is just the area to the south of Rome, quite a large region with high elevation vineyards and just fascinating for wine. Really, really fascinating region for wine. This is a grape called Aglianico. And how many days of maceration do you think it had, Natalie? Just guess.
I have no idea. Lots?
Trick question, because it's actually direct press. So Aglianico is like, I think it's like one of those grapes like Syrah that's so dark, you can just direct press it and it looks like this. So direct press, just to explain, means the grapes went directly into the press. That's all.
They didn't stay in contact with the juice. Yeah.
This is a lovely rosé. It's a natural wine. And so they've actually, this is really amazing. So their label is so clear. I'm not sure how close you can see it, but they've actually written contiene sulfiti non aggiunti. And so they're achieving a level of specificity that's extremely helpful. Has sulfites not added. In the United States, any wine that's imported, it's basically legally required to write contains sulfites, which is super confusing to consumers because they're like, wait, why does my natural wine say contains sulfites? And so winemakers have started adding contains sulfites, but we didn't add any. And I think that's really helpful. And this is also a biodynamically farmed vineyard. It's quite small. 2 hectares, which is like around 5 acres. It's just 2 people. Lovely little rosado to look for. Canlibero.
I love the stories that, as you said, when you visit these places, you're visiting with a family. So I love that aspect. And it's that holistic living again. Just wonderful exploration of culture and family and everyday decadence, as you say. Well, Rachel, this has been wonderful. Let's just see your book one more time so that people know you had me at Pet-Nat, which is terrific. That's great. I love that. I know everyone will enjoy it because whether you're really knowledgeable about natural wines or you have no idea what they are, this is a story that will still, I think, shed light on them, surprise you. There's lots of insights, but it's also your personal journey that makes the memoir so worth reading. I mean, it's about love and connection and all that good stuff that wine helps facilitate.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure.
Really quickly,
Go ahead.
just for your listeners, when they are participating in the giveaway, just to specify, so what the 2021 subscription includes is issues 8, 9, and 10. Issue 10 is coming out in October. We're just finishing it up right now. And that's actually the last issue of Pipette.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I'm giving myself a break after producing 10 issues. And so it'll be a subscription, meaning like a package of the 3 issues we produced in 2021. Most of the back issues are on the website. So anyone who's curious, people always ask like, oh, where do I find it? There are lots of stockists in Canada, in the States, and they're all listed on the pipettemagazine.com website. If you just look at stockists at top. But our web shop is super easy to use and we can just ship them easily. But yeah, whoever is the lucky winner will get issues 8, 9, and 10.
Wonderful. They're so beautiful. Oh, I just like touching them. I can't keep my hands off them. Anyway, all right, Rachel. Well, thank you so much. I wish you all the best with this launch. I know it'll be a success because your story is it's from the heart. And I think people will really connect with that and with you. So I'd love to stay in touch and have you back on the podcast. Maybe we can touch base and see how it went maybe a year from now or something like that.
That's a great idea. I've loved talking with you. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Rachel. Bye for now.
Okay. See you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of our chat with Rachel Signer. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, I really admire how Rachel and her husband have tried to be as low intervention as possible when making wine, even to the point of working the wine press by hand and not with electricity. Number 2, I've always loved the complexity and taste of field blends. I hope you'll seek them out for your own sipping pleasure. And 3, I so relate to Rachel that writing about those you love is the most difficult part of writing a memoir, as I continue to edit and agonize over my own manuscript. In the show notes, you'll find a transcript of our full conversation, how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, links to where you can buy Rachel's book, as well as to the CTV video I mentioned in the intro, and where you can find me on Zoom, Insta, Facebook, and YouTube live video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/152. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with Scott Greenberg on his podcast, The Vine Guy. He also hosts the Wine of the Week show on WTOP Radio in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, if you missed episode 84, go back and take a listen. I chat about the hottest wine trends with Darren Election, the wine columnist for the Calgary Herald. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
Natural wine is basically wine in its purest form. They do it as simple as they can. They grow organic grapes or biodynamic grapes. They bring them in. They use natural yeast that's in the air. They don't add any yeast. They don't add any kind of additives or chemicals or anything. They make the wine and they put no sulfur or maybe just a small amount of sulfur in the wine at the end before they cork it. And there it is. It's wine in its purest form. Whereas orange wine is not necessarily natural wine. It's kind of like all champagne is sparkling wine, but all sparkling wine is not champagne. Okay. Orange wine is white wine where they ferment it on the skins. So it sits on the skins for quite a while.
And that's where it gets its color.
Yeah, and that's where you get the orange color from. And you get tannin, which is something you don't necessarily see very often in white wine.
If you like this episode, please tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines and trends we discussed. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a field blend as you continue to read Rachel's memoir.
You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.